Chapter 6, Section 3, Natural Selection. Learning objectives: describe the conditions for natural selection. Explain what evolutionary theory suggests about the unity and diversity of life. Darwin worked out the main ideas of evolution by natural selection soon after reading Malthus's research and thinking about artificial selection. His scientific friends urged him to publish his brilliant arguments, but Darwin did write up a complete draft of his ideas. But he set the work aside for over 20 years. Darwin knew that many scientists, including some of his own teachers, ridiculed Lamarck's ideas. Darwin's theory was even more radical, so he wanted to gather as much evidence as he could to support his ideas before he made them public. Darwin's contribution was to describe a natural process, a scientific mechanism that could operate like artificial selection. In An Origin of Species, he supported his ideas with arguments from Malthus and Lamarck. Malthus's work had convinced Darwin that since all populations have the potential to produce more offspring than can survive, members of a population will compete for a finite supply of environmental resources. Darwin described his competition as a struggle for existence, but which individuals would succeed in surviving and reproducing? Darwin hypothesized that individuals with certain types of inherited variation are better suited or adapted to life in their environment than other individuals. Any heritable characteristic that increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its own environment is called an adaptation. Adaptations can involve body parts like structures like a tiger's claws. Adaptations can also involve colors like those that make camouflage possible. Darwin, like Lamarck, recognized that there must be a connection between the way an organism makes a living, so to speak, and the environment in which it lives. According to Darwin, differences in adaptations affect an individual's fitness. Fitness is described as how well an organism can survive and reproduce in its environment. Individuals with adaptations that are well suited to their environment can survive and reproduce and are said to have high fitness. Individuals with characteristics that are not well suited to their environment either die without reproducing or leave relatively few offspring, and they are said to have low fitness. This results in the differentiated reproductive success, or as some call it, survival of the fittest. Darwin named his mechanism for evolution natural selection. Natural selection is the process by which organisms in nature with variations most suited to their local environment survive and leave more offspring. In both artificial and natural selection, only certain individuals produce offspring. But in natural selection, the environment, not a farmer or animal breeder, influences the fitness. Natural selection occurs in any situation in which more individuals are born than can survive. The struggle for existence. Natural heritable variation affects the ability to survive and reproduce, variation and adaptation. And fitness varies among individuals, differentiated reproductive success. In this picture, you'll see two different types of grasshoppers, one that have yellow coats and the other that have green coats. Hungry birds can easily spot yellow grasshoppers. Green grasshoppers blend into their surroundings so more of them survive and reproduce. Over time, green grasshoppers become more common. Yellow grasshoppers, which are more likely to be eaten by birds, are less likely to pass their genes onto the next generation. This is an example of natural selection. Natural selection depends on individuals' ability to reproduce and leave descendants. Every organism alive is descended from parents who survived and reproduced. Those parents descended from their parents, and so forth back in time. Just as well-adapted individuals in a species survive and reproduce, well-adapted species survive over time. Darwin proposed that individual species are descendants with change over time from common ancestors, an idea called descent with modification. Darwin's ideas that natural selection and adaptation can produce new species offered an explanation for both the unity and diversity of life. Darwin sketched his thoughts about descent from common ancestors in the form of a branching tree, similar to the one shown on this slide, where all the finches of the Galapagos Islands descended from a common ancestor. Darwin was the first to use a tree-like model to represent common descent. The very first organisms form the base of the tree, and their descendants form the trunk and branches. According to the principle of common descent, all species, living and extinct, are united by descent from an ancient common ancestor, and exhibit diversity due to natural selection and adaptation.